In the last video, you seen that I took Casper to the drag strip, and the video was called Lessons Learned. I discussed the things that I learned by taking it to the track, shaking it down, and today what we're going to talk about is the problems that I have with mixed up BOSS. Stay tuned. As you know, this thing has a Cleveland tunnel ram, and in the last video I actually had people making comments, why would you put a Cleveland tunnel ram on a Windsor? Well, the answer is not really that simple. First, it fits the part of mixed up BOSS. It looks the part, it looks vintage, and unfortunately you cannot get a true vintage looking tunnel ram for a Windsor because really, the Windsor was never considered a performance engine back in the day. Let's be real about it. So, when I set out to build mixed up BOSS, I wanted to have something that was going to be relatively easy to work on. So let's take a look at this, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So as you see here, I have the tunnel ram off of mixed up BOSS here, and doing some work. Well, the cool part about running the tunnel ram that I'm using, the Cleveland design, it's a dry intake. Meaning I don't have to break open the water system in order to get the intake off of it. Getting the intake and carburetors off literally took maybe 15 minutes, and that's pushing it really. You'll notice here that this engine has a valley plate right here, but it also has an access panel that you can get to the lifter valley through these 6 bolts right here. And it's sealed off with the O-ring seal. Greg Brown at Hammerhead Performance Engines did a great job of coming up with this. And when I told him why I wanted to run a Cleveland tunnel ram, he thought, man, that's a pretty cool idea. But as you can see, the ports on this engine are fairly large. I mean, it's dark down in there, but you get an idea. They're actually slightly larger than the 1262 gasket, and I had to enlarge it. But let's talk about what I found once I got the intake off. In the last video, I discussed about having an intake vacuum leak on cylinder number 7. This is that gasket. So what is so telling about this used gasket? Well, if you focus in right here, you can see a witness mark of the intake, and you can see just how close that is to that edge, not leaving hardly any room at all to seal. After much consideration, I'm going to go with the Cleveland intake gaskets because the runners are matched to the intake, but the Cleveland gasket will come out here and be a better fit for the manifold itself. So let's take a look at that. So as you can see here, this is the Cleveland port face here, and you can see where I've added epoxy to this side and to the top of the runner to make it fit the Windsor style port on the head. And while it works really good, you see all of this material up here. I really think that the Cleveland gasket is going to seal it much better in the end. Probably won't have to use RTV or Right Stuff, but you can see that I took the entire unit off in one piece. Now this stuff is heavy, especially with 2 Dominators. But I found issues once I started taking the engine apart. Yeah, let's talk about it. If you want to know my opinion on the best distributor ignition system that you can get that's on the market today, bar none, Progression Ignition. This thing is unbelievable. You're going to be seeing a lot of videos with me showing the details of how I go about tuning CASPER with this particular distributor setup. You do it all from your cell phone. You choose the entire timing table, go through, and it's all wireless. You don't have to get a timing light out once you set it up initially. But one of the things that I really wanted to check more than anything was the condition of this. If you will remember, in my 393, this roll pin was the ultimate demise of my engine. So I'm a type of person that believes that everything happens for a reason. So me taking this distributor out just to check things over was a really good thing, because I don't know how well it will show up here, but this is a melanized gear, and it has a lot of wear, or what I would consider a lot of wear for 600 miles. I don't know if you can see it in the video, but it's obviously there. The end of the teeth are getting kind of thin, which tells me that it's not happy. Another issue that I found was, if you remember in the video where we installed this distributor on the dyno, it fits extremely close here to the intake manifold itself. In fact, I mean, I'm going to actually grind this a little bit more to clearance it more before I put this thing back together. But apparently when we ran it on the dyno, look at this here. The rotor was actually rubbing itself or clearing itself in the cap because it was bound up. So it makes me wonder if 708 was all that it had. I've got to get another cap on the way. I'm going to change the rotor just for the sake of doing it. Change this gear, and we should be ready to rock and roll. After seeing the condition of the distributor gear, the first thing that I did was send Luke at Howard's Cams a message, and Luke is a great guy. Howard's Cams, top notch. I can't say enough good things about him, really. Luke actually has a turbo Ford Ranger with a Windsor in it, not an LS, just saying. So you need to go check his channel out up here. I'll put a link to it so that you can go see his goodness of stuff. But I sent him a message and asked him, what core cam do I actually have? What is the camshaft made out of? Because in the beginning, I thought that the melanized gear would work really well with that solid roller. Andy thought wrong. It apparently is not happy. So what is the answer to that? And after a conversation with him, he told me that I needed to put a cast iron gear on the distributor because of the cam core that this is. This is actually a Sadie core. I wasn't aware of that a long time ago. So he said that running a cast iron gear on this distributor is what it needs. So luckily, I think I caught it in the nick of time so that it didn't damage the camshaft gear. And I actually took my little bore scope and run down in there. Looked really good. It didn't appear to hurt the cam gear. So I'm going to change the distributor gear out, and hopefully those problems will be alleviated. But it just goes to show the importance of not taking anything for granted when you're building an engine like this, and making sure that everything is like it should be. You know, because if I would have continued to drive this engine CASPER, it would have destroyed the gear on the distributor, destroyed the gear on the camshaft itself, and then old Andy here would be upset because I would be having to pull the engine back apart, change the camshaft out because my mistake. Lesson learned. Another thing that I wanted to do, since I had it down this far, and I think it's a good time to do it since the intake is off and I can actually access the lifter plate, is to pull the valve covers off and make sure that the lash settings on the valves are staying put, because this is a solid roller. The lash shouldn't change, and if I do see a variance, I can get inside the lifter valley and find out what's going on with the lifter that's being affected by. So for those that's never seen inside Mixed Up Boss, you're going to get to see the valve train arrangement, and we'll get to see how clean it is. Hopefully everything is like it should be. Big old valve covers. These things are heavy. At first glance, everything looks like it should. The Jessel rockers. Let's see. Make sure that none's excessively loose. There's preload on that. And that's got a little bit. But so far, so good. I'm going to start checking the lash on the valves, and then I will let you know what I come up with. So after checking things out, everything appears to be in good shape. While I was setting the valves, it actually gave me an idea of some talking points I need to address about these lash settings. From Howard's, the recommended lash setting is 22 thousandths on both intake and exhaust. You have to remember that this camshaft is designed to have 1.6 rockers instead of the 1.72s that are actually on it from Jessel. So when you go to change rocker ratios on a camshaft that it is designed for a given ratio, it also changes the lash requirement because of the acceleration rate of the opening and closing. So with the 22 thousandths here, it comes out to be right around 24 thousandths. So basically opening that lash up 2 thousandths is going to give you the same amount of lash as what you would have with a 1.6 rocker. Another thing that I want to talk about is how lash affects duration of a cam. That's one thing that I've never really talked about. In my experience of using a degree wheel and degreeing cams and all of this and that over time, basically my experience has taught me that 1 thousandths of lash is equivalent to about 3 degrees of duration. That's a lot, right? Yeah. So changing lash settings can have a pretty big impact on power as how it's being delivered in the engine. I mean, changing your lash settings. Now, when this thing was on the dyno, we run through lash loops, finding where it made, you know, best power, and it was right at 24 thousandths, just like Howard's recommendation of 22 thousandths, taking in consideration the rocker ratio. So as you can see, I've got some issues I got to get sorted out. You know, I don't know if you've paid attention or not, but there's this race coming up here in the next little bit with a guy named Uncle Tony. Yeah, what a character. With old Casper here and his bottle rocket. So basically, I've got to get this stuff put back together and get it dialed in and get it ready for that $5,000 race, because Tony is going to give me $5,000, whether he realizes it or not. But anyways, so you can see the importance of going through and checking things out. This applies to every engine build. You know, once you put a car on the road or truck or whatever it is you have, going over it after a few hundred miles just to make sure that everything is just like it should be. You know, I've got to get that distributor clearanced and pull compression on this thing once I get it put back together. I'm not going to do it right now because, well, there's no distributor in it, and I don't want to do that without any kind of oil pressure from the oil pump. Which leads me into another thing that I kind of want to address. I've had people talking or seen in the comments where there's not enough oil pressure. You know, there's a problem with the oil pressure. Well, this thing stays steady at the standard rate spring that's in it. which is 50 psi. Okay, it's not 70 or 80. You know, and one thing that I've always been cautious with Windsors and 302s is not running too much oil pressure, because that puts an extreme amount of wear on the gear, which I'm getting an extreme amount of wear gear on it right now, and it doesn't have excessive oil pressure. So, but if it did have that, it would wear it out a lot sooner. Also, I believe in having enough oil flow to keep the valve train cool so that you don't get any kind of galling on the end of the push rods. So I didn't restrict any of the oil passages to keep the oil in the bottom end, because the Windsor does have the priority main oiling system in it. But yeah, this hot rodding stuff is fun, right? I hope you got something from this video, and I've got to get CASPER ready to take Uncle Tony's money here in the next little bit. It might be still a few weeks off, but it's coming to a track or Mexico, wherever near you. But you'll get to see it as it happens. And until next time, this is Andy from Unity Motorsports Garage. I'll catch you later.